At 22 minutes from 95th, we're on tri-state delays from the Stevenson to the Hinsdale Oasis and Reaganville to Irving Park. That's traffic. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center and meteorologist Steve Williams.
Today, mostly sunny, cool, and the high at 52. Some clouds tonight, low 41. Cloudy and a few showers tomorrow, the high 62. Partly sunny, windy day on Wednesday with a high at 51. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
37 at O'Hare, next news 7:30, and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Retire Chicago. Tune in Saturday mornings at 8 to Retire Chicago with John McNamara of McNamara Capital.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. It is Columbus Day. That means if you're a member of Antifa or some other group of left-wing cranks and thugs, you'll be looking for a Columbus statue to deface and otherwise vandalize.
Is it Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, or a little bit of both?
It's Columbus Day. For me, I don't know what it is for you. I guess you can rewrite history how you see fit, Howard Zinn style, since he's, I think, credited mainly for this propagandizing against Christopher Columbus, the agitprop that Howard Zinn produced under the cover of American history, the people's history of the United States, of course. The truth is, of course, that Columbus, the actual truth, separated from Zinn's agitprop, all of the talk about Columbus mistreating indigenous people, all of the talk about Columbus being out for gold and riches and aggrandizement, his exploration, if you know your history, which I know most don't, was religious. That was his motivation.
Well, I remember hearing about Christopher Columbus on The Sopranos.
Mr. Cushman is teaching your son that if Columbus was alive today, he would go on trial for crimes against humanity like Milosevic in, Europe.
Your teacher said that.
It's in my history book.
So you finally read a book and it's bullshit. Look, you had to walk in Columbus's shoes to see what he went through. People thought the world was flat, for crying out loud. Then he lands on an island with a bunch of naked savages on it. That took a lot of guts.
Who cares? It's what he did.
He discovered America is what he did. He was a brave Italian explorer. And in this house, Christopher Columbus is a hero. End of story.
It's shocking that Tony Soprano knows more about American history than do many academics, including Howard Zinn. But, of course, they have a different agenda. In point of fact, the gold that Columbus was seeking was to fund a crusade to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims. That's fact. It's also the fact, and Carol Delaney, among other historians, have documented this, that rather than cruel, Columbus was mostly benign in his interaction with native populations. While deprivations did occur, Columbus was quick to punish those under his command who committed unjust acts against local populations. He strictly told the crew not to do things like maraud or rape, and instead to treat the native people with respect. There are many examples in Columbus's writings where he gave instructions to this effect. Most of the time when injustices occurred, Columbus wasn't even there. There were terrible diseases that got communicated to the natives, but he can't be blamed for that. Not that he was without flaw, because he was just a human being in 1492. But, in terms of the rewriting of American history that we're wont to do. By the way, another day we should commemorate today, since we couldn't do it yesterday, and that's what would have been the 94th birthday of Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the UK, in one of her great speeches against socialism. Just to memorialize her a bit, since we don't have audio of Christopher Columbus, and we just have a defense from Tony Soprano, we do have audio of Margaret Thatcher.
One of the great debates of our time is about how much of your money should be spent by the state and how much you should keep to spend on your family. Let us never forget this fundamental truth. The state has no source of money other than the money people earn themselves. If the state wishes to spend more, It can do so only by borrowing your savings or by taxing you more. And it's no good thinking that someone else will pay. That someone else is you. There is no such thing as public money. There is only taxpayers' money. And prosperity won't come by inventing more and more lavish public expenditure programs. You don't grow richer by ordering another checkbook from the bank. And their demands have to be reconciled. How very pleasant it would be. How very popular to say, spend more on this, expand more on that. And of course we all have our favorite causes. I know I do. But someone has to add up the figures. Every business has to do it. Every housewife has to do it. Every government should do it. And this one will.
Those are revolutionary statements today. I mean, they didn't seem so revolutionary back during Reagan and Thatcher, their respective heights, but it certainly does today, where Bernie Sanders is running on the criticism of frontrunner Elizabeth Warren that she's really a secret capitalist. That's his criticism to half of the country. She's a secret capitalist. I'm the real thing, the real socialist. By the way, favorite Margaret Thatcher line of mine.
Yes, what?
I know everybody always goes to the problem of socialism is you run out of other people's money. That's a good one. My favorite.
That is my go-to. How did you know?
Yeah, I figured. My favorite. No one would remember the Good Samaritan if he only had good intentions. He had money as well.
Oh.
For more on these topics and a few others, we're pleased to be joined again by Don Boudreaux, American economist, George Mason University, where he co-directs the program on the American economy at the Mercatus Center. And also you get his writings at Cafe Hayek, which is a great blog. Don, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's hard to follow Tony Soprano and Margaret Thatcher.
We're showing off our range here on the show this morning, Don.
Only here, Don.
Yeah, that is true. I didn't really think about that.
Yeah.
That is quite
we
the
got
span.
you covered, if you know what I mean.
I'll ask you to comment on either, but probably Margaret Thatcher would be more center cut for you. What about listening to what she had to say some 3 decades ago? And then the Bernie Sanders criticism over the weekend, trying to get back into this race. The problem with Warren is she's not an authentic socialist.
Yeah, the world just gets crazier and crazier. If Thatcher were alive today, you can only imagine how she'd respond. First of all, if she were not, she is a socialist by most reckonings. I wish she were not so much, but what you said earlier captured it. The very fact that half the country finds it to be a criticism of someone, that someone might be a capitalist, is sad and telling and very dispiriting. We've taken a terrible turn. And, you've mentioned a lot of my favorite Thatcher lines. One of my other favorites is at one point she held up Friedrich Hayek's Constitution of Liberty. My blog is Cafe Hayek. And, she told the British Parliament, this is what we believe in. This is the old British style protection of liberties, protection of capitalism, protection of markets, protection of the rule of law and private property rights. That is going, unfortunately, out of the window now, it seems, and we have to protect against that if we can.
One of the things, too, it's just a constant struggle. I'm sure you get even more exasperated by it than I do, but Wall Street Journal reporting on Friday as there's this trade war truce between China and the United States. China emerges with wins from U.S. trade truce. American consumers win when the trade truce occurs, as do Chinese consumers. But it's always the wrong perspective. It's treating the discussion on trade as like the U.S. corporation and the China corporation rather than individual people, individual business owners, individual American consumers. It just annoys me to no end because it's the maleducation of the public.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. The standard view that is out there is that we Americans win the more we export and the less we import. It's the opposite, as you suggest. We Americans win the more we import, that we get in imports in exchange for our exports. I would love it. I would love it. Every American would love it if the Chinese would send us stuff for free. Unfortunately, they don't do that. They demand our stuff in return. But the perspective, that for some odd reason that's out there in the public, is that when we get that exports are a great benefit, and that unfortunately we have to suffer taking imports in exchange. You know, the plastics and the steel and the consumer electronics and the clothing that we get. These are all burdens that we must bear for the privilege of being to work for and send our stuff to foreigners. It's just crazy, backwards nonsense.
How would you, if you were advising, if you were there with Larry Kudlow trying to advise the president in the direction of freer trade, what would you say to build on this this temporary détente to try to get it to permanent détente?
Boy, you know, how to do it politically, I just think Trump is so thick-headed when it comes to trade. He's just terrible on it. I don't know how it would change his mind, but if he would ask my, you know, what's my perspective on the way the world works, I would say, look, you want to make America great again? I'm all in favor of that. First of all, I think we're still great by most measures, but if you want to improve the lives of Americans, right, then rely upon what has worked historically. Let Americans be free to spend their money as they choose, be free to invest their money as they choose. If the Chinese or the Uruguayans or if the Germans, whoever it might be, offer our American citizens deals that are best in their eyes, how do we make them better by preventing them from accepting those deals? We don't. So let them accept those deals, let them spend their money as they choose. That will improve Americans' living standards better than any restraints that the government can put on our commercial dealings with foreigners.
We have a trade war going on with China, but we also have an NBA war with China. And what do you think of this whole NBA and free speech?
So, look, there's no question that the Chinese government is tyrannical. It's a beast. It's authoritarian. I despise. I would not want to live under it. And so, what you're referring to, obviously, is the tweet by the Houston Rockets general manager that the NBA took down because the tweet was in support of the Hong Kong protesters, and hence a tweet that was not liked by the tyrants in Beijing. I can't make a business decision for the NBA. The NBA has to make a business decision itself. I mean, it's got a lucrative market in China. The authoritarians in Beijing put conditions upon American companies doing business there. But what I disagree with is this notion that we, the United States government, would make matters better by further restricting American companies' freedoms. The Chinese government's perfectly good at doing that. It basically in this case, it's telling the NBA, look, if you want to do business here, you can't say certain things. It's horrible, right? Maybe if I were an NBA team owner, I would say this is unacceptable. We shouldn't do business with these people. But what is not acceptable is for our government to tell the NBA, look, the Chinese government's taking some of your freedom away, so we're going to take even more of your freedom away by not even giving you the option of doing business in China. I don't believe that the U.S. government is any better at being an arbiter of how these decisions should be made than the business people on the ground. If I were the NBA, I probably would have made a different decision, but that's not my place to say. But I certainly do not think it's business of the United States government to say.
It is sort of a sad commentary, though, the juxtaposition between U.S. NBA business executives taking down tweets while pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong are erecting a 4-meter Lady Liberty statue at the top of Lion Rock, a 500-meter peak in Hong Kong. I mean, the juxtaposition of what we're willing to kowtow to against their fight for freedom in Hong Kong is really something.
Yeah, I admire them greatly. You know, no one knows how it's going to turn out, but this may be, you know, the defining political struggle or ideological struggle of maybe the first half of the 21st century. It could be akin to the American Revolution. You know, you have two people that they're culturally similar, but they have long been politically separate. You know, the Hong Kong people have known freedom, they've tasted freedom, they are enjoying the fruits of freedom, not only the material fruits, but you know, the ethical fruits, the moral fruits, spiritual fruits of freedom as well. And they do not want to go, and they will not, and they are not going quietly into the dark night of authoritarianism. So they're fighting. And for the Chinese government in Beijing to suppress that, they can, but it's going to take a huge amount of cruelty and force. And we'll just see how it plays out. Obviously, like everyone who's decent, I'm hoping the people of Hong Kong win. I'm optimistic that they will eventually. Maybe not until a lot of blood is shed, unfortunately, but that was the same with the American Revolution. So I'm waiting, like a lot of people, with great anticipation to see how this plays out, because I believe it is a defining struggle going on now.
All right, we'll end there with the paraphrasing of Dylan Thomas and encouraging the Hong Kongans to rage against the dying of the light. Don Boudreaux, American economist. He is the co-director of the American Economy and Globalization Program at the Mercatus Center, George Mason University. And check out his recent columns on the topics we discussed, cafehayek.com. Don, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, as always.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
My name is David Hochberg. If you'd like to pay off debt, call Team Hochberg now about a cash-out refinance. During May, Team Hochberg helped listeners access $953,000 to pay off credit cards, student loans, car loans, medical bills, collections, and IRS tax liens, which saved them close to $19,000 a month. Since January, Team Hochberg has saved listeners over $74,000 a month, which is an annualized savings of over